The sky above the dense jungle shimmered with a strange glow, the alien ships cutting through the clouds like sharp knives, their presence unnoticed by the world below. As they descended onto the thick green canopy of the Amazon, the massive vessels hummed softly, their hulls sleek and metallic, reflecting the faint light of the distant sun on Earth's horizon. They landed silently in the heart of the jungle, far from any prying eyes. This was their plan, to remain unseen, to blend into the wilderness, and extract the resources they had come for without attracting attention. They thought themselves clever, but they underestimated one thing: the jungle, its primal power, was alive in every leaf, every root, every animal that called it home. And in one man who had become a part of it, Tarek moved like a shadow among the trees, his senses finely tuned to the rhythms of nature. He had been living here for years after abandoning his former life. As a soldier, the chaos of the outside world seemed so far away. As he melted into the fabric of the jungle, the sounds of distant aircraft had alerted him something wasn't right. It wasn't common for anything to fly over this part of the world, especially not at such low altitudes, but Tarek had seen enough to know when something was out of place. He followed the unnatural patterns in the sky, his instincts sharp with every step, every breath. He knew the jungle better than anyone alive, his eyes scanning the underbrush for any signs of movement. The ground beneath him was soft and wet, but his feet barely made a sound. His mind was already working, calculating the angles of his path, his eyes catching glimpses of disturbed wildlife, tiny creatures fleeing in panic. Something was coming. Tarek felt it deep in his bones. These invaders did not belong here, and they would pay for it. Soon he could feel the electricity in the air. The way the animals had gone silent, the jungle had sensed the presence of the unknown. Just as he had, only he knew how to move unnoticed, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He would track them, he would learn their ways, and when the time came, he would show them the true power of Earth's wild heart. Tarek smiled to himself as he crouched low, his movements slow and deliberate, each step bringing him closer to the unknown threat. His hands were steady as he readied his weapon, not a gun or a blade, but a long sharpened spear made from the bones of a great beast he had slain years ago. This was his world now, this was his battleground, and the invaders would soon learn that no matter how advanced their technology, no matter how powerful their ships, they would never understand the jungle the way he did. Tarek's eyes gleamed with determination as the faint outline of the alien craft came into view through the thick foliage. They had landed and were now investigating the land around them, their figures moving strangely, like they were still getting used to their environment. He took in the scene with a careful eye, each alien's motion a piece of the puzzle he would use against them in the days to come. He wasn't ready to strike yet. No, he would wait. They had no idea who they were up against. Tarek spent the next few days studying the invaders. He observed their movements from the shadows, like a ghost blending into the jungle. He saw the way they moved. Their technology was advanced, but clumsy for this environment. They stumbled through the thick underbrush, their strange suits and weapons ill-suited for the unpredictability of the jungle floor. Their heavy footsteps disturbed the wildlife, sending creatures scurrying in every direction. The invaders were still learning how to navigate the wild terrain, and Tarek could feel his advantage grow with every passing hour. He knew that in a place like this, where the rules of survival were written by nature itself, it wasn't technology that would determine who thrived, it was instinct. He began to follow their patrols from a distance, staying hidden from sight, using the trees and the thick vines as cover, his eyes always on the aliens, making mental notes of their weaknesses and habits. They were methodical in their search for resources, but they hadn't yet realized how vulnerable they were to the very things they had come to conquer. The ground beneath them was teeming with life creatures that could tear apart their machines and their bodies in an instant. He had already seen a few of their scouts injured by the native fauna, an alien with a gash across its arm from a venomous plant, another nearly falling prey to a massive snake that lurked in the shadows. They were not invincible. They were still flesh and bone. And even with their advanced technology, they could not outrun the jungle's dangers. Tarek began to plan his first move. He would strike swiftly and without warning. The aliens had no idea who or what they were up against, and he was ready to show them what it meant to trespass on Earth's soil. Tarek waited until nightfall, the best time for such a task. The jungle came alive at night, with the sounds of chirping insects and the calls of distant predators. The air was thick with humidity, and the smell of damp earth. Tarek moved through the trees, like a phantom, his spear ready, his senses on high alert. The first alien to fall would be the scout, who wandered too far from its comrades. Tarek watched it closely. As it circled the area looking for anything of interest, it moved in an odd pattern, unaccustomed to the ways of the jungle. And that was its mistake. The alien's back was to Tarek. As it examined the base of a massive tree, Tarek closed the distance, silently using the dense foliage to cover his approach. With a quick and practiced motion, he threw his spear. The weapon sailed through the air and struck the alien square in the back. Its body crumpled to the ground. With a wet thud, the other aliens didn't even hear the sound as they continued their search, unaware of the danger that had already struck one of their own. Tarek withdrew quickly into the shadows to watch the chaos unfold. He could hear their panicked voices as they scrambled to locate the source of the attack. But by then it was too late. Tarek was already gone, slipping away like the wind, leaving nothing behind but confusion and fear as the jungle once again reclaimed its territory. The alien scout was dead, and Tarek felt a strange sense of satisfaction as he watched the others scramble in confusion. They were disoriented and afraid, their carefully planned operation thrown into chaos. The aliens weren't used to fear, not in the way humans understood it, but the jungle was a different beast altogether. It didn't care for their technology or their arrogance. It simply existed in its primal state. And now it was challenging them in ways they couldn't comprehend. The night stretched on as the invaders searched for the source of the attack. They couldn't even track him. They didn't know the jungle well enough to understand the signs, the broken branches, the shifted leaves, or the subtle disturbances in the underbrush. All of it was invisible to them. But Tarek saw it all. He moved in and out of their patrols undetected, a ghost in the trees, slipping through their search grid with ease. He could hear them muttering to each other, their voices rising in frustration. Tarek's plan was working. They were beginning to doubt themselves. They had no idea how vulnerable they were, no idea that the very land they thought they had conquered was their greatest enemy. Tarek knew the aliens would grow desperate. The longer they were stranded in the jungle, they would make mistakes, they would expose themselves, and he would be ready to exploit every one of those mistakes. When the time came, he would strike again and again until they learned the lesson. The jungle was not theirs to command. It was a force of nature that could not be bent to the will of invaders. The next few days passed in tense silence. The aliens did their best to regroup and adjust their strategy, but their movements were erratic. They were now on edge. They no longer trusted the jungle's calm facade. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind made them jump, as if the trees themselves might be watching them. Tarek watched them from afar. He was patient. He was the predator, and they were the prey. He could feel their growing unease, their uncertainty, and he fed on it. It was time for his next move. This time, he would get closer. This time, he would show them just how easily the jungle could turn against them. He waited until the following night, when the moon was high in the sky, casting faint shadows across the jungle floor. The air was cool and still. Tarek moved silently through the trees, closer than before. He could see the alien camp now just ahead. They had gathered around a small fire, trying to stay warm. The flickering flames illuminated their faces, but not enough to see their surroundings. Tarek crept forward, inching closer with every step, his every muscle coiled and ready. He could feel his heart beating steady in his chest. His eyes locked on the alien leader, the one who commanded the others, the alien who seemed to have a glint of intelligence in its eyes. Tarek's grip tightened on the spear he had crafted from bone and stone. He was almost there when suddenly one of the aliens turned its head sharply, as if sensing something. A low growl echoed from the jungle, a sound that made the hair on the back of Tarek's neck stand up. The aliens froze, looking around in confusion. They had finally realized something was wrong. The jungle wasn't empty. It never was. Tarek stayed perfectly still, his body pressed against the bark of a towering tree, his eyes narrowing. As the alien group became tense, their weapons drawn, scanning the dark jungle around them, Their leader's posture shifted as it sniffed the air. The growl was distant, but it was a sound the aliens had never heard before. It wasn't like the usual wildlife calls. This was something deeper, something primal. The aliens didn't understand nature like he did. Tarek felt the vibrations of the jungle beneath his feet. As the ground began to shift, he could sense the animals moving in on them, closing in with deadly precision. The aliens were out of their element, and their confusion gave Tarek the advantage. The lead alien turned sharply, pointing its weapon in the direction of the sound. The others followed suit, but none of them saw the true danger lurking just beyond their sight. The jungle was alive in ways that they could not fathom, and Tarek was about to show them exactly how alive it was. Suddenly, the shadows erupted as a massive predator lunged from the undergrowth, a creature that was half hidden in the night, its sleek body moving like liquid darkness. With claws that glinted in the firelight, the alien leader shouted in surprise as the creature took one of their own in a flash, its jaws snapping shut around the alien's neck. The others fired their weapons in a blind panic, but the creature was too fast, too agile, weaving through their attacks with terrifying precision. It was clear now that the jungle was no place for them. Tarek had been watching the entire time, waiting for the perfect moment. And when the first alien was dragged away into the shadows, he sprang into action, his spear thrust forward with lethal force, striking an alien in the side before it even realized he was there. The others turned in panic, but Tarek was already gone. He was like a shadow vanishing into the foliage. Before they could retaliate, the remaining aliens scrambled, their calm shattered in an instant as the jungle's many threats closed in. Tarek could feel the adrenaline surge through him. His instincts were in overdrive, his heart racing. As he watched the chaos unfold beneath him, he had made his presence known. Now the real hunt began as the aliens tried desperately to reorganize their forces. Their attempts to communicate with their ship were useless. Tarek had already sabotaged their technology days before their ability to communicate with one another was slipping away. And now they were scattered and confused. They didn't even know which direction to go in anymore. The jungle had them surrounded. Their enemies were closing in from every angle, and still the aliens struggled to adapt. They couldn't comprehend the threat in the way a human could, and it was that failure that would ultimately doom them. Tarek wasn't just fighting them anymore. He was teaching them a lesson they would never forget. He moved silently among them, his spear never missing its mark, picking off the aliens one by one. They were becoming too desperate to think clearly, but Tarek had patience, and he was in no rush. The jungle would claim them all, and they would never see the true power of Earth coming until it was too late. The chaos continued as the aliens scrambled through the jungle, their once coordinated efforts now disjointed, and panicked. Tarek watched from the shadows, his eyes flicking from one alien to the next. He could see their fear creeping into their every movement, the way their weapons shook in their hands as they tried to defend themselves, the way they looked over their shoulders in desperation. They were no longer invaders, they were prey, and Tarek was the hunter. But it wasn't enough yet. The time had come for him to push them further, to break them in ways that would teach them to never underestimate Earth's wilderness. Again, he waited until the first light of dawn began to creep through the canopy. The jungle was quiet for a moment as the night's predators retreated into the shadows. The aliens thought they had a moment of respite, but Tarek knew better, and he was already on the move. Before they could even react, he set traps all around them, traps that would test their strength and their resolve. He had studied them carefully. Their weaknesses were clear. They relied too much on their technology to protect them. But in the jungle, technology was a crutch. It was the Earth itself that had the power, and it would show them that today. He watched as the first alien stepped into a pit of sharp, spiked branches. Hidden beneath a layer of leaves, the creature screamed as it was impaled, and the others rushed to its aid. But they were too slow. Another alien triggered a vine trap that swung down from a tree branch and knocked it to the ground, sending it tumbling into a pile of thick thorn bushes, its weapon flying from its grasp. They were in disarray, now scrambling to regroup. But the jungle didn't care about their panic. Tarek used their fear to his advantage. He moved silently between them, setting traps and striking when they least expected it. Their leader barked orders at the others, but it was clear the command was losing its weight. The alien's once cool demeanor had cracked. Its mask of confidence was slipping, and Tarek could see the shift in their behavior. They were becoming increasingly frantic as they realized just how dangerous the jungle could be, how far out of their depth they truly were. Tarek pressed his advantage. He knew the key to breaking them wasn't just physical, it was psychological. He wanted them to see that the jungle was not something to conquer, it was something to survive. And they weren't going to survive if they kept fighting the land instead of working with it. So he began to take his lessons to the next level. This wasn't just about evasion and ambush anymore. It was about making them understand the essence of what they were dealing with. He led them through a stretch of jungle where the foliage seemed to close in around them. Thick vines tangled in their feet, and massive trees towered overhead, blocking out the sky. The air grew thick with humidity, and the sounds of the jungle were oppressive. The alien forces grew more and more frustrated, their leader snapping at them to move faster, their weapons firing wildly at shadows as their fear began to cloud their judgment. Tarek had them exactly where he wanted them. He didn't need to fight them head-on. He simply needed to force them to break under the weight of their own panic. His next move came swiftly as he triggered a massive rockslide above them. The sound of the boulders crashing down onto the path sent the aliens scattering in all directions. They were no longer organized now, they were just surviving one by one. They were forced to retreat in every direction, the jungle's grip tightening around them. Every step they took was one closer to their undoing. Some of them stumbled into pits they hadn't seen, others fell prey to the wild creatures that prowled in the shadows. And yet Tarek was always there, watching, always moving among them, his presence like a silent specter in the trees. Their numbers dwindled with each passing hour. They couldn't keep up with the jungle's brutal pace, and they couldn't fight what they didn't understand. Tarek was the embodiment of the jungle itself, and as the day wore on and their strength began to falter, Tarek knew the time had come for the final test. He was going to make them see that Earth didn't need to be conquered, it needed to be respected. But before he could deliver the final blow to their invasion plans, he would make them feel every ounce of Earth's fury until they begged for mercy. The hours dragged on, and the jungle seemed to grow even more hostile. The alien invaders were battered now, their once pristine armor dented and scratched, their weapons malfunctioning from the relentless assault of nature. The alien leader was visibly shaken, its eyes wide, as it scanned the darkened jungle around them. They had tried to communicate with their ship, but their signals had been jammed days ago, and now they were isolated, surrounded by a relentless force. They couldn't comprehend. The jungle had shown them its might, but Tarek wasn't done yet. He had watched them long enough. He had seen their arrogance, their belief that their technology and their superiority would be enough to conquer any planet. But the jungle was different. It was alive, and it fought back. He had taught them that now the final lesson awaited. Tarek knew that the aliens weren't stupid. They had adapted in their own way. They were learning how to survive in this hostile environment. But there was still something they didn't understand, something they would never understand. No matter how much they learned in this jungle, they would never fully respect it. And that was the difference between survival and conquest. The alien leader was no fool. It had seen its forces decimated one by one, and it knew its time was running out. It had a plan. It had to have a plan to get them out of this nightmare. Tarek watched as the leader barked orders at its remaining forces, desperation creeping into its voice. The jungle had eaten away at their unity. A commander's once flawless demeanor had turned into fear. The cracks were showing, and Tarek was going to exploit every one of them. He stepped out from the shadows, his silhouette barely visible among the trees. But the alien leader saw him, its eyes locked onto him with a hatred that could cut through steel. The time had come for Tarek to make his final move. He wasn't going to just hunt them anymore now. He would make them realize their invasion had already failed. They had lost before they even landed. The alien leader fired its weapon at Tarek, but it was too slow. The shot missed by yards, and before it could even react, Tarek was upon it. The jungle was his home, and he knew its rhythms better than anyone. His spear struck with precision, a lethal blow to the alien's shoulder, sending it crashing to the ground. The other aliens reacted in panic, trying to protect their fallen leader. But it was already too late. Tarek was in their midst, moving like a phantom, striking them down one by one. He didn't need to fight them all. He simply needed to show them that they were powerless. Here the jungle had claimed them. The alien soldiers were collapsing under the weight of their own failure. They couldn't defend themselves against the land they had underestimated. They were beginning to turn on one another. In confusion, each one realizing the truth, their mission was doomed. They weren't going to win. The jungle was an untamable force, one that could not be controlled or conquered. No matter how advanced their weapons, no matter how many soldiers they had, it was the land itself that decided who would survive. And the jungle had already chosen. Tarek was everywhere now, his movements fluid and relentless as the jungle itself. He had learned from it, adapted with it. And now it was time for the aliens to understand just how deep that connection ran. He didn't need to speak to them. They had no words for what he was showing them. The jungle was his ally, and it had always been. The final proof came when the alien leader tried to flee, dragging itself through the underbrush. The others scattered in every direction, but the jungle wouldn't let them go. Tarek followed silently from behind, watching as the leader struggled to move through the thick vines that seemed to grab at its limbs, pulling it back into the earth. Its panic had only increased now. It could see that there was no escape. Tarek was the embodiment of Earth's wrath, the jungle's fury given form. And now it was time for them to feel its full force as the alien leader's screams echoed through the jungle. Tarek knew their invasion was over. They had lost not to his skill, but to the raw, untamed power of Earth itself. And as he stood victorious over them, he knew the jungle had claimed yet another victory. The alien leader's last cries faded into the dense undergrowth, and Tarek stood over it, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of the jungle around him. The sounds of distant creatures still echoed in the air, but for a moment everything felt still, as if the earth itself was taking a breath. The fight had ended, but the jungle was not yet finished with the invaders. Tarek glanced at the remains of the other aliens, scattered across the jungle floor, their once high-tech weapons and armor now useless against the force of nature. They had tried to dominate the land, had won. The jungle had won. Tarek had won. And in the process he had sent a message, one that would echo far beyond the dense walls of the Amazon jungle. The invaders had learned the hard way that Earth was not some vulnerable planet to be taken. It was a place of power, a place of life that fought back. When threatened, the jungle was Earth's most primal defense. Its heartbeat pulsed through every leaf and vine. Its fury was limitless. And now the aliens were nothing more than a lesson written in the soil. They had been foolish to think they could come here and conquer the land. It was always the land that would decide who ruled, and Tarek had shown them what that meant as he stood there watching the last flickers of light fade from the sky. The sun's rays slowly sinking beneath the horizon. He felt a deep sense of calm wash over him. The world was still, the jungle was still, and his job was done. The invaders would never return. Their ship lay abandoned, a silent testament to their failed mission. The creatures of the jungle would reclaim what had been disturbed, and the land would heal. The animals that had once fled from the aliens were now slowly returning to their natural paths. The air felt less tense. The wind moved freely once again. It was as if the land had rid itself of the infection that had tried to take root. Tarek took one last look at the alien camp, the wreckage left behind, the twisted bodies of the invaders, and he felt no anger, no hatred. He only felt the deep understanding that this was the way of the world. This was the cycle of life. The strong did not always prevail, but those who respected the land, who lived with it in harmony, would always survive. And those who tried to dominate it would always fall. He turned his back to the wreckage and began to walk deeper into the jungle, the trees towering above him, the sounds of birds and insects filling his ears with their songs. He was a part of this place. Now this was his home, his life. And the jungle had accepted him as one of its own. The hunt was over, but the jungle would continue its endless rhythm. And so would he. The predator had returned to its natural state, and the earth would always remember the lesson it had taught to those who sought to trespass on its soil. They would learn in time, or they would never learn at all, but either way the jungle had proven that it was not to be underestimated. Tarek smiled softly to himself as he disappeared into the dense foliage, knowing the world was safe. Once again the lesson had been taught, and Earth would never be the same.